In this video, you're gonna get a sneak peek inside of a private event we did for 178 of our clients, all 7-figure plus business owners. And the Q&A was all about sales teams. So building setter teams, building sales teams. And really me and my business partner, Bryan, went an hour or so just answering all of the questions these high-level business owners had in terms of how to scale their sales team. Enjoy it. Cool. So what we're gonna do is a Q&A, and we're going to really focus it on sales team stuff, because that's what we're known for, and we only really had kind of one presentation on that yesterday. So here's how we're gonna start. Raise your hand right now if your sales team either is like just not really that good or not performing, or it's just not performing at the level you truly feel like it could be. Okay? Okay, that's a lot of people. All right, well, keep your hand raised. We'll start with you. What do you think that is going on with your sales team that could be improved?
They're brand new.
Sorry?
They're brand new. We just brought on a new.
Brand new. Cool. So what's the biggest challenge you have with ramping them into KPI?
Well, I've worked with them now for less than, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So it's training, reviewing, level them up. I've already got them started doing those on closing.
Cool.
So I have complete confidence that it'll move into the right
Cool.
direction.
So nothing,
It's just
yeah.
But the systems are proving themselves out.
Right.
The way we're doing our meetings every day, the stats, the training, going over these calls, everything's coming along.
Cool. So would it be helpful if we talked about ramping for a second? You get a new sales rep, how to ramp it into KPI, even though nothing's wrong, you're following the process. I'm sure that's gonna be helpful to at least a couple people. So Bryan, what would you say, Bryan, obviously, if you guys don't know, Bryan, he really started RCA with me. He built the fulfillment and the sales team, really everything. I handled the marketing, he handled everything else, and we built that to RCA's best month is about like 1.54 million. SDA's is like 2.34 million best month. So that's how it kind of breaks out in case you were wondering. But Bryan's crushed it with that. And RCA is really only, it's a younger company, right? A lot more room to grow to, it's B2C. So Bryan's a sales team expert. How would you think about, if you got new reps, ramping them into KPI?
Yeah, so the first thing that you have to get over is deciding whether or not this is somebody that's gonna be worth pouring time into. i.e. are we gonna keep this person or are we gonna fire them? Here's the simplest framework that I've found to know whether or not a rep is gonna work out on my team. If I do a call review with a sales rep and they make a very obvious, blatant mistake, like let's say they don't set the frame of the call appropriately, right? It's just obvious mistake, and I give them very clear coaching on that one thing, and then the next day they make that same mistake, and I give them a coaching again, and it happens a third time, they will make that mistake for their entire career, for the rest of their life on your team. It'll never get better. And what I found is sometimes sales reps just don't align with the offer that they're on, or they don't align with the team or the culture. So within the first 30 days, if a rep makes the same mistake 3 times and it's a very blatantly obvious mistake, it's the most clear indicator that they'll continually make silly, stupid mistakes, and you should start to look for somebody new. This doesn't mean they didn't close 3 calls, but very obvious little things that they should be able to do. So that's the first part. The second part is the easiest way to get a rep to KPI within the first 30 days is to meet with them every single day and train them every single day. Sounds like complete overkill, but when we bring a new sales rep on our team, they do not go a single day without a call review from a leader or a team lead or a manager. And if you do that within 30 days, almost always they'll be at least 65 to 75% of your total KPI after 30 days. It's really remarkable. You can take what most people do in 90 days and do it in 30 if you just meet with them every single day.
Cool. Did you have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, it's part of that, how they differentiate with setters. When you think about ramping up setters.
Yeah, what about setters?
Man, we almost spend twice as much time with setters. Matei, our team lead, outbound manager, when we bring a new setter on, he does call reviews every single morning, and then he'll also get on and help them with workflow in the afternoon. So I actually think setters need twice as much time as closers do.
Yeah. So the main thing is when either if you have a sales manager or you're the sales manager. Obviously, if you're the sales manager, you're also doing a bunch of other stuff. You kind of got to do a balancing act. But let's say you have a sales manager. This is the rule of thumb, okay?
80 to 90% of their time is literally just coaching people and quality control, QC. What's QC? Call reviews. So, I mean, in a way, it's kind of a boring position because they're just sitting down all day, pumping out call reviews. That's it, okay? Now, obviously, there's a leadership component to it. There's accountability component to it. At a certain stage, if you're not doing the hiring, they got to do the initial hiring and ramping. So there's that as well. But like the majority of what probably you need to get off your plate is the hiring, ramping, and then, there's this mass amount of call reviews. Now, if you don't have a sales manager, maybe you got 2 sales reps, you're like, okay, a sales manager would be overkill. Kind of depends on your situation. Mitchell talked about that yesterday. But if you don't have one, you just need to create some sort of cadence in your week where you do call reviews. And it could be as easy as like, on Saturday, you're just gonna lay in bed, whip out your laptop, as soon as you wake up, set the timer for 2 hours, have your VA prepare a Google Doc, bunch of links of calls, and then all I did was I would just listen to the first 10 minutes at 2.5x speed with captions, and the last 10 minutes at 2.5x speed with captions. Because through the intro and through the outro, you can identify the red flags, and where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So you kind of pump out call, that sounds pretty good. Pump out call, sounds pretty good. Pump out call, intro's a little shaky, discovery sucks, and you're like, dude, I would have closed this person. That's where you then review the entire call. Then you either do a whole call recording, send it to the rep, or you might say, hey, this is a really good one. I'm gonna save this till Monday, and then do that one on a team call with that person. Does that make sense? Cool. So, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, question. Let's say they are, like you don't catch any mistakes within 30 days, they're following what you're telling them to do, but they're still not looking KPIs. What's the time frame you actually give them?
Well, let's ask the real question, right? They're not making any mistakes, but within 30 days, they're not within KPI. So what's the real problem? Like as Tom was saying yesterday, what's the category problem?
Unless I'm trying to figure out. Like,
No, the category problem is you're not catching the mistakes. You think there's no mistakes, but by the very nature of them not being in KPI in a position where you've already validated you can get into KPI, there is mistakes. Does that make sense? So the blind spot is you're not good enough at sales management, right? So how do you get better at sales management? Well, you get better at sales. How do you get better at sales? Well, we have like a shitload of resources, shitload of training, calls, etc. Bring the call to your AM, be like, dude, can we review this together? Because I'm not getting why he's not closing. I was closing. I'm not getting why this guy's not closing. Obviously, it's a pretty normal offer. I know what you guys do. Like, it's not like it's like off the wall weird that where only you can close. They should be able to close. And so I'd have your AM, hey, what am I not seeing? That's gonna alleviate your blind spot. You're gonna be like, oh, okay. Now your sales manager skill set went from a 6 to a 7.5. You no longer have that issue. So it's not what do you do when it's like what do you do to prevent that situation in the first place? Does it make sense?
yeah,
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, in other words, it's like you're basically saying, yeah, they're doing everything I'm asking them to do, and they're not performing. Right? So it's like, well, if you're telling them to do things and it's not eliciting the result, you're telling them the wrong things.
Or you're not telling them
Anything. Yeah. And so 100%, like you just really need to learn that going from a basketball player to coaching a basketball team is an entirely different skill set. And you have to approach it that way. And so you have to go then now learn the skill of like, how do I teach sales in a way that's people can implement? Just go through all of our training and you'll learn how to do that. But you do have to make the mental recognition that the way that I play basketball is not the same way that I'm gonna coach a basketball team.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about where I've been able to be at as a company, and this is even when I was just doing, I was only like $100,000 a month, because I would consult big companies doing over $1 million a month. Like we probably, I want definitely over 50. Maybe even higher than that. Worked with companies at least over $1 million a month, right? And there's not that many companies in this industry that are at that level. And so I've worked with a lot of them. Now, what that allows me to do is kind of create this sort of meta-analysis of like, well, what all these people have in common. So they always usually follow in the 1 or 2 categories. Now, there's obviously ones that, I'm not saying all of them do, but generally they fall into 1 or 2 categories, okay? You either have like the Alex Becker type person, absolute savage at marketing, to where he creates an environment where the sales team is just closing laydowns. They can be terrible. Super hard because you got to be really good at marketing, right? So I talked to a guy Wednesday 6.5 million a month. I was like, how many sales reps do you have? And I know who this guy is, so like I know he's not that good at sales. I was like, how many sales reps do you have? 64. I was like, how many managers do you have? 2. Automatically, I'm like, the sales team sucks. Like I know they stink. So then I literally actually told him this to his face. Granted, we had a degree of rapport. I just literally told this guy, your sales team probably sucks, doesn't it? And he was like, yes. And I was like, they're probably closing laydowns, right? And he's like, absolutely. So what was this funnel? It was a buyer funnel, completely liquidated, and they were just closing buyers who had received the test kit and all of this stuff. They'd been through all of this content, etc. So they had a webinar on the front end doing like a couple million a month. They're just knocking down the buyers. There's probably a ton falling through the cracks, but they're liquidating all their ad spend, so it doesn't matter. So that's like one camp. The other camp, and this camp is more common, and I think it's honestly easier. That's hard because you also have to offer. You know, like you could be really good at marketing if its offer's not right. You're not going to create that laydown environment. The other bucket is think about somebody like us, really good at training sales teams, or like look at Alex Hormozi, terrible marketing, sales team, dude's pretty much a savage. Like he's one of the only people when I hear him give sales trainings and give advice on sales teams, I'm like, yeah, it's like pretty much the same conclusions that we've gotten to. You know, I can think of a bunch of other people who've gotten above $1 million a month, and the founder or one of the co-founders is a really great closer. And so then it kind of creates that like sort of base in the company, because if they're a really great closer, they can probably become a pretty good sales manager or a really great sales manager, you know? And then they can also eventually probably train a really great sales manager, you know, but those skill sets transcend. I would say that the latter path is easier, just in case you guys are wondering, but for certain people, I mean, the other path does work. We just got people closing laydowns of buyers. But you gotta, I mean, believe me, I've done the call funnel and I've managed the sales team myself, and I've done the auto webinar where I've liquidated, you know, at the 1K auto webinar. Dude, the sales team is way easier. The auto webinar, I mean, how much do I complain about that?
Every day.
Yeah, I just cry. It's like, yeah, if it only wasn't for this auto webinar, like this thing, it takes all of my time. The call funnel, I mean, I would say that webinar takes 10 times the amount of time. It sucks. But, I mean, it is worth it. Like, I think if we can figure it out, you know, the upside's there. And I do, in a sick way, kind of enjoy the pain. Okay, next question. So, hopefully, I don't even know where I just like started ranting. That was you, yeah.
We're about to hire our first 2 closers, and I was just wondering if you knew or recognize like the top 1 or 3 mistakes people make in the first 30 to 60 days.
Yeah, so maybe do it this way. You were closing RCA all yourself, and we were in a place where you're about to hire our first salespeople. What are the top 1 to 3 things you wish you would have known back then that you didn't know and you made a mistake?
Yeah, that's a good way to word it. So
Yeah.
I would say
It's probably more than 3.
Probably more than 3. It's a long list. I would say number 1, you have to be extremely patient with people, but ruthless with standards. And what I mean by that is like you need to be, and this is, I say it this way also because it's a very common thing I've noticed talking to all of you, is you let your standards slip and then you blame it on the people. So you need to be really patient with people while they're learning, adjusting to a new offer, adjusting to a new team, adjusting to a new level of stress. Patient with people, ruthless with standards. Standards are things like end-of-day reports, being to meetings on time, having wins ready to go, doing all the little things right, confirming calls on calendar. Like those things you have to be ruthless about. There's no excuse for them not happening in the correct way. But you do have to be patient to the fact that like you're bringing on reps to the first time in a company for like it's a new process, which means like you're not going to have things ironed out. You're going to have hiccups. There's going to be learning curves, and it's silly to like pretend that that's not going to exist. So that's number 1, is patient with people, ruthless with standards. And then number 2 is you need to, like I said earlier, you need to give them so much more attention and time and coaching and training than you can imagine. Like you literally need to listen to every single call that they do and take and coach them through every single call for the first couple weeks. It's not just a magic cure-all to put closers on the phones. And then number 3, you also have to recognize that there's going to be an immediate opportunity cost to you two not taking calls, right? Like you probably close at 40% of live calls that you take because it's your offer. A new rep's gonna be at like 10 to 15. So the reason I say that is you either need to plan for a really shitty month the first month while they ramp and like be okay with that, or you need to hedge and you continue to take calls while you train them and lead from the front. I think that's the best thing everybody can do. I think it's a huge mistake to go from all of your revenue being dependent on 1 or 2 people and just putting it off your plate. I think one of the things that made RCA have such consistent velocity is like I was taking sales calls up to like 600-700 grand a month while leading the team. It's a little bit extreme, but it allowed me to lead a team from the front and be the player coach. And so we never had a sunk opportunity cost of new reps. And if you just give them all your calls, in like 60 days from now, you're gonna be like, this is the worst thing we've ever done. Like we're pacing to have our worst month ever. It's gonna affect how you lead the people, because then you're gonna be like pushing them. You're gonna be like, wow, these people suck when they really don't. It'll create a bias, it'll cloud your judgment. So that's a couple things. I know there's a lot there, but that's what I wish I would have known.
Yeah. Hey guys, we'll get back to the content in a second, but I have a quick favor to ask. We don't run any ads or really do a lot of promotions on this channel at all, but the one thing that would really help us out if you're getting value from this is if you could share it on your socials. So specifically sharing it on your Instagram story through a screenshot, or just pressing share and really sharing it on any platform. The main way we plan to grow this isn't through ads, it's through word of mouth. So if you're getting value, that's the one thing you could do. Make sure you tag me on Instagram at Cole Thomas Gordon. And with that said, back to the content. There's also, I've never seen a time where somebody was like, man, my sales team's not performing. My next question's like, what do you see when you review the calls? And then usually the response is, well, I haven't been reviewing a lot of calls. And then it's like, okay, well, go review a call, then you tell me what you think the problem is. They go review the call, they're like, oh, it's so obvious, or it's like they're doing everything wrong. It's like, okay, now you know what to fix, right? So most times, if you inspect what you expect, the problem just really like slaps you in the face, And really this goes for your entire company. So think about it this way. The quality of your company is the quality of what happens on the front lines, right? And the front lines is all the little points of your company that your customers interface with, right? So that's everything really from the ad, which is gonna set the expectation from the very beginning. The ad is very important. The VSL, the funnel, all that stuff. The sales process, and then the onboarding call with the CSM and all the touch points with the CSM and, of course, the group calls, et cetera, the upsell call, all of those things, right? That's really the quality of your company is the quality of all of those little things. Well, if we know that to be true, if our job is to improve our company, how do we do that? How do you improve those things happening on the front lines? You do it through QC. You can only do it through watching the game tape. And so the same way we're like call reviews on sales reps. For fulfillment, it's like you should block off some time to watch some onboarding calls, train on how to get better onboarding calls, block off some time to watch the coaching calls. It's like this is like the really boring stuff. Sucks. Like I'll just be straight up. It's not like, oh, it's kind of fun in the beginning and then it gets better, or no, and then then it gets boring. No, it's just boring from the start. Probably gets worse, and it's going to really motivate you to hire a manager. But that's fine. So just remember. That is one of the big things that we really preach, and really why at scale, we're still a pretty efficient company and we have better profit margins than most companies, is because the front lines is really, really high quality, but that's because of the managers who train them, do a ton of QC. The other thing too is if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, well, I don't have time to do all these call reviews. The way you want to scale, if you can, I'm not saying it's going to apply to everybody, but man, this is like the way to do it if you can, is yes, in the beginning, a lot of your energy comes to trying to find product market fit with your funnel and getting paid ads to work, right? Or some sort of reliable acquisition channel. The nice thing about paid ads is until you get to really high scale, once you get it to work, you're gonna be able to fill 2, 3, 4 calendars just by clicking a campaign and basically more or less, I'm simplifying it, pressing duplicate or raising budget. It's pretty easy. Doesn't take a lot of effort at all. And so once you have that in place, it's like we were spending all of this time in our marketing, and now really it's about just spending more and then maybe making the occasional creative, but basically spending more, and then a lot of hiring salespeople, a lot of hiring CSMs. So it usually looks like this. 0 to 150 grand a month, you're trying to figure out the freaking funnel and try to get consistent acquisition. Once you get to about 200 grand a month, you probably figured that out. 200 to $1 million a month, or maybe a little bit below, can depend on your offer, your price point, etc. But let's just call it 200 to $1 million. It's literally spending more and then just hiring, training, managing, getting the sales team better, hire, training, and managing, getting the fulfillment team better. I mean, that's literally it. Somewhere along the way, you realize I cannot manage these 2 teams myself. You take inventory on which one you're worse at, you hire a manager there. Or which one drains your energy the most, you hire a manager there. Then you're you're leading the CSD, you're still the sales manager, next one's a sales manager. Now you have a C-suite team. Then you have a lot more time back. You're probably 800 grand a month. Then you shift your attention back to marketing, which will probably need it by then because the one ad that you had working is not working anymore. Does this make sense? So it's almost like you kind of, if you're like a music artist, you're like not famous, not famous, not famous. You get a famous single, and then it's like, once you have that famous single, you want to just ride that wave as long as you can, right? Don't mess with your marketing. Just hire salespeople, train salespeople, hire CSMs, train CSMs, and then just build up the managers. So then that way, if you're not focused on the marketing aspect of things and you have CSMs in place, really the only thing that's left for you to do is just coach and train your team. And then eventually you'll hire the managers. Then you kind of go back to marketing a little bit. That's what I did. And I still coach and train my managers. Does this make sense? So if you've seen my like 5 phases of like make yourself rich, make your clients, it's kind of like the same thing. Because that's what happened with us is once I got the marketing working, I just set and forget that and just increased budget. And I was all in on the team. Then once Bryan and Mitchell came along, I was like, okay, you guys are freaking really good. I just went right back to marketing. Hopefully that makes sense.
Question on the ruthless with standards. What does that look like, Bryan, when someone misses an end of their work and they're the top person or the bottom person? What's the process of elimination? Because you don't just fire me when they miss one.
No. So what I would do, and what I would tell my leaders to do is first thing I would do is just call them and be like, yo, why did you miss? It's really important every time a standard is missed to lead with the open mind that something could have happened, right? And nothing will make you look like a worse leader than when you're like, dude, what the hell's your problem? You missed your end of day. If this happens again, and then they're like, sorry, dude, this horrible thing happened. And you're like, oh shit, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. And so I always just lead with yo, what happened? And then if it's oh, I'm sorry, blah, 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 it's just dumb or oh, I missed it. Then it's okay, just so you understand, this is part of our culture that end of days need to be done at the end of day. If for whatever reason you can't, you need to drop a message in the Slack channel and say, hey, X, Y, and Z is going on. I'll do my end of day by 7 a.m. tomorrow. And then you want to relate it back to a company culture. For us, it's high say-do. It's look, our company culture is having a high say-do ratio. As soon as our culture breaks, as soon as our standard breaks, we don't have a company anymore. And so you not doing your end of day is breaking a core value of our company, and we can't grow if we're doing that. And then if it happened again, let's say a week later, and it was the same excuse, then at that point I would say, hey, often what you'll always find as well is somebody that consistently misses an end of day also has a myriad of other things that they're doing wrong. And so I would just at that point be hey, if this happens again, we're gonna have to have a conversation about letting you go because you're breaking our core values, and this is a very simple, controllable thing.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, them missing an end of day will also be a problem within a chain of problems.
Yeah. And when you're having those PIP conversations, a good thing to say, instead of say, well, we might have to talk about letting you go, you say, we may have to find a graceful way for you to exit. Yeah. I didn't make that up. But yeah, I mean, the big thing is so when you have the scorecard review, and look, they're really good at this. I end up getting too high level and I miss this shit sometimes. So this is advice to myself too. When you're having the scorecard review, what's really the scorecard review? You're creating agreements and expectations on what I'm gonna pay you this, and I'm gonna give you all these things, and here's what I expect in return. It's really agreements, expectations in that scorecard review call. And then it's all written down. Like Tom said, if it's not written down, it's so much less powerful, right? So it's all written down, and you're literally looking the person in the eye before you hire them, and you're like, can you do this? Can you hit these KPIs? Are you gonna do these responsibilities? Here's the communication standards we expect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You wanna be super clear. So then what happens is, let's say the salesperson, like Bryan said, misses the end of day, you call them, they don't answer. You text them, hey, I know it's the evening, but unless you have like some emergency or some family thing planned, give me a call if you can. Then they don't respond. Because I'm sure that's like probably happened to some people. Then they don't even respond to that until the next morning. Then you finally get them on a call. What you could say is, hey, earlier when we had that scorecard review, we talked about two of our biggest values being what? Get and stay in sync and really having that great communication, radical candor, radical transparency, and high say-do ratio. When we say we're going to do something, which one of the things you said you were going to do is those end-of-day reports, you do it. That high say-do ratio is 1-to-1. But in the past, 24 hours, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. Now let me ask you, do you think, I know you're the type of person who's capable of being in those core values. I wouldn't have hired you if it wasn't. But do you think those behaviors align with those core values we agreed upon? Okay, how do you think we remedy this moving forward? Right? But when you use the core values, what you can do is you can basically isolate the behavior. And it's like, hey, I know you're capable of being in the core values or you wouldn't be here, but the behavior is obviously out of alignment. You're good, the behavior's not good. How do you think we should fix this? Does that make sense? Cool. Somebody had my man, Boyd.
Question, I need y'all's help with this. Company's growing and we're spending very little money on ads. We're doing between 1.2 and 1.6 a month. We've got 8 reps right now and 1 sales manager. So I'm trying to figure out what do I need to do to scale? Because last month I spent like $12K on ads. And so I want to ramp that thing up to 70 or 80. I'm gonna completely obliterate my calendars and be wasting money.
Yeah, well, for anybody who is doing the math in your head and is like, screw that guy. I got a problem. I did 1.6 million last month and I spent 12K. Oh, okay. Sorry. You just teed yourself up for that one, dude. Okay, so I mean, in extreme scenarios like this, right? What I would look at, for me, I'm like especially when you start really you put all this energy into the marketing, the last thing you want to see is like calls that you think could close, not get taken. However, if you have 8 reps, they all have full calendars and your cost per call is 37 cents. What I would do in that scenario is I gotta weigh, okay, do I wanna go through all the operational complexity of hiring more salespeople and just making that a huge pain in the ass, right? And scaling to 16 reps and having to get a manager and then a player coach or a manager and then an additional coach and have them split up the reps 8 and 8. That's what you'd have to do. Or do I just find a way to elongate the application grading, add more friction somewhere in the funnel, and then just give these people better leads so I can get my closers from, let's say, 20 to 30 closes per month to 40 to 50 closes per month? That's your answer. All right. Do you have anything to add to that? We've been through that, by the way.
Yeah, the second sales team thing's really hard. It's really, really hard. And exactly what he said, we did in March the same amount of cash with 6.5 closers, 6 and a part-time who was transitioning, as we did the previous year with, I think, 13 or 14 closers. So yeah, I would just focus on efficiency and building into those 8. I mean, I think you could get well over 2.5 into 3 million with 8 really efficient calendars, maybe higher, and then reevaluate once you get to that point.
Yeah, what's your price? Is your price still 15? Okay, so roughly, let's say it's 1.6, well, you're saying 1.2 to 1.6, so let's call it 1.4. That's about 130 units, maybe it's 125 units. If you have 8 closers, they're not even at 20 closes a month, right? You can definitely get them to 30 closes a month apiece, right? And I'm telling you, it's when you weigh, unless you have the situation like I was telling you, the Alex Becker type situation, where you're just really good at marketing, you're like, yeah, let's just throw bodies in there, we're gonna have them laydowns. I mean, even then, I would still have an efficient sales team. But in your case, it's the energy it would take, it's just so much better to have a smaller sales team make them really good than have just a bunch of knuckleheads. Yeah, they're just driving you nuts. They're not following up. I'd rather have the guys that's like, man, they're ripping. And once you get these guys doing 30 sales a month and they're making what, 30 grand a month, they ain't leaving.
Yeah.
Where are they gonna go at that point? Unless they just really shit. I was doing that and I left, but unless they want to, strike out on their own or whatever, or they get super. I didn't want to start a company at the time. I was just so burned out, and so unless you're really burned out or whatever, but generally you're gonna keep your people, especially if you have good culture, work-life balance. So 77X. We got you right there, or okay.
Bryan, you mentioned going from 13 rep count to improving the efficiency. What goes into that?
There's a couple things. So number one, I would say our outbound team is 10x as efficient this year as it was last year. And the result of that is our show rate from setters hovers at like 75%. Also, Matej, right over here. Matej, stand up.
Go ask that guy questions.
Yeah, he's our
He's been a little bit too much on vacation. I need to put that guy to some work.
Yeah.
So
all of you
come to him with your setter problems.
Yeah, pull up your spreadsheets. He can rip some call reviews for you right here. Anytime.
Yeah, just take him out in the hall. Have him start reviewing some
Whatever
calls.
you need. But so as a consequence of that, we get about 90% of our closes right now from our outbound team, and their show rate is 75%, right? So like if you're running a book a call funnel, especially at scale, you'll start to see your show rate go down into maybe the 50s. So going from a 50% show rate to 25% show rate is a huge relative increase. So that's number one. And then number two is the skill set per closer is just way higher. And part of that is like when you have 7 reps versus 14, I can spend twice as much time with each rep. So their skill set gets a lot higher. The other thing too is when you have 7 reps making the same amount of money as what you would spread out over 14 reps, the churn is almost non-existent because they're usually pretty happy, their calendars are pretty stacked. Like it's hard to get much better than that as a closer. When you have a really efficient stacked calendar, obviously you're gonna have up and downs, but it's hard to beat that.
So like a follow-up to that would basically be, would you recommend like really filling out a smaller group of closers' calendars and getting them dialed in than having more reps like at scale?
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a balance,
There may be some like insane situation where you just like if you're like an influencer and you just have such an overflowing amount of leads, like he was
laydowns.
talking about, then yeah, you just need to get people on the phones. But for most of us, we're like, we really need to be cognizant of the percentile differences in our marketing, and we need to be really cautious with margins. Yeah, get your sales team as good as you can. That's the best lever.
Yeah, let me give you a quantitative number to just make it real easy. If you look at your P&L and your ad spend is less than, let's say, 25% if you're B2C and 20% if you're B2B, if your ad spend is less than that on your P&L, I would err on the side of hiring more closers and just spending more on ads, right? If your ad spend's creeping up, then okay, we need to get marketing more efficient, and part of getting that whole system more efficient is increasing the close rates. The other thing is too, if your here's another quantitative benchmark. If your closers are above 20 units a piece on average a month, I would err on the side of just adding more closers. But if you're doing pretty well, even if your ad spend's like 15% of the P&L, but your guys are doing 12 and a half units a month, look, in most cases, I would just bring the sales team up. Okay. Now, if they're doing 12 and a half units a month and the deal price is 50 grand and these are, 14-day sales cycles, I mean, there's a lot of if and ands, and it depends on the situation. Generally, in most transactional sales, though, that 20 units a month, once you get above that, I'm seeing a pretty good sales team. Once I see below that, I'm like, 15, I'm like, okay, you could scale, but it's not that efficient. You're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. If I see below 15, it's not good. I've rarely seen a situation, unless it's like this big higher ticket thing, longer sales cycles, etc.
Yeah, and for all of you, like your team can be so much better than you probably give your team credit for being. Like, this is very self-aggrandizing, but just for example, like in March when we had our best month, and my closers, a lot of them were right there. I have the best closers in the world at RCA. But in March, on a $9,800 offer, our upfront cash collected was 43% on day one cash, really good. Show rate from our outbound team was 75%, really phenomenal. 90% of closes came from sets, really phenomenal. And our close rate as a team, just live call to close, was 38% as a team. It's insane. And so, like, a lot of you are probably at like 25, 30% upfront cash, 20 to 30% live call to close. So you probably almost have a doubling of efficiency that's possible within your current team. And at least getting a 50% relative increase of performance with your current team will have so much more long-term benefit than just hiring new people. Like, when you can get people in your team, this is a cultural thing, when you can get people in your company and on your team to have a 50% increase in efficiency, that almost always means that they'll have a 50% increase in pay with the same relative workload on their calendar. Who is ever going to leave a team? Like, what's the percentage likelihood of somebody leaving your company when you make them 50% more income with the same relative workload? It won't happen. What often causes a lot of you to like backslide? Churn. And so the other consequence of like hiring too many salespeople at too many times is like, imagine your sales rep number 2 of a company, and your calendar's not very good. You're only making $6,000 a month, and like your show rate's bad. You're not getting enough calls, and then the business owner is like, hey guys, like, I'm bringing on more sales reps. Like, as sales rep number 2, you're like, dude, what the hell? Like, you're talking about taking care of me and like helping me get to my goals, but then it seems like from my perspective, you're doing an exactly counterproductive thing to what you told me you're trying to help me do. Because all that's gonna do, from my perspective as sales rep number 2, is take less calls. Like, I'm gonna take less calls, have less coaching, have less help. Like, you're a selfish leader. And then if sales rep number 2 thinks that, like, good luck growing.
Keep in mind, when we say 90% of closes are coming from sets, that's just our B2C, and we're running an auto webinar. So there's no like book a call except through email. So just keep that in mind. And we're trying to raise the percentage from email too. We're doing some things there. So I just don't want you to think if you're running a call funnel, 90% should come from sets. The other thing too, just to steel man what Bryan said, everything he said was right. I just would keep in mind, you can also fall in the trap of like, oh, my sales team's at 27%. Should I scale, or should I like, I'm not gonna spend any more on ads until I like get them to 32. And it's just like, yeah, okay, that'll help you scale, but like you just kind of gotta weigh the path of least resistance sometimes. So just, you know, a lot of this is judgment, different circumstances. So anyways.
This kind of has to do with shortening a sales cycle. So we kind of have that Alex Becker problem in a way where I'd say half of our leads that come in are extremely nurtured podcast listeners. They're like pretty laid down. And then our sales team has kind of adopted this idea where they get a colder lead on the call. They're like, they just found us. Let us send some resources to them. Let us like warm them up. Versus knowing how to close.
Yeah. Dude, an easy way to do that. Okay, this is like a kind of a hack. How many of those people do you get?
Especially lately, it's been more majority, right? Because it starts to kind of burn through.
Yeah, is it like 10 a week, or are you getting like 20, 30, 40 a week?
It's definitely 30, 40.
Okay. Well, that kind of screws up my plan.
I think we can do something fun here.
It might not be that much. It might be more.
So if it was like 10 a week, what I would do is like once you get your sales manager, you can actually pay your sales manager less, but give him all those leads, and he's gonna look like the biggest stud in the world, and like it's gonna help you really liquidate all of his middle management, and then all the main sales team is just taking the regular leads and getting them in a rhythm. Like, because one of the things I do is, you know, it's tough because like when you bring in more levels of sales management, it's like it really hurts your P&L unless the sales team gets better. So like any referrals I get, I'll send the sales manager. Okay. And like, you know, it's not, if you're taking like 4, 5, 6, 7 calls a week, that's not messing up your week. Once you start getting above probably 10, I mean even like 8, I'd say, then it's a little dicey. What's your thing for that? I'm not saying that's just, if you had like a little bit, that's what I would do. If you have 20, 30, it's not gonna work, so.
Yeah, I have some coaching, but I think it would be fun. Let's get a mic to one of our closers. Let's do John. Let's get John a mic. John. So, John, how do you think a sales meeting would go if you got on and you were like, hey, Bryan, dude, like, I didn't close 3 out of
Stand up.
Yeah, 3 out of my 4 calls yesterday I didn't close because they were like newer and they didn't know us very well, so I sent them resources. How do you think that would go?
Oh, I know how that goes. It is not going very good.
In what way though?
What would it sound like? What do you think my coaching would be?
Say, all right, take me through the calls. We take me through the calls. You say, okay, pull one of them up, drop a link in the chat. Drop a link in the chat, we pull it up, we review the call, rip it to shreds. Rip it to shreds. And then we adjust, we go back in the day, we have 3 more of those people that show up, we adjust and close.
What would I say about our culture and how we view calls like that?
Then we close everybody that shows up.
Yeah, one of the things too that Josh Johnson, who's our sales manager of the B2B, if anybody ever mentions, ever, that they watch my YouTube channel, which is not very many. Have you guys seen it? It's like 500 views a video. It sucks. But if anybody ever does watch it, if anybody says that in an application and they don't close, that's like an immediate call review. Like, we got to figure out what the hell happened. Right? So again, like, that's in our company, organic leads are like, that is a laydown. Like, I mean, honestly, if you had a really good sales team, if all our leads were organic, I mean, our sales team might close like 65%. And I'm not even kidding, of live calls. Because, man, the main thing you have to usually overcome is just like, oh, I just found out about you 24 hours ago and you're a stranger from the internet. But anyways, I kind of went off on a divergence there.
There's a couple things that I've been really grateful that I've always instilled as a cultural piece of a sales team. Like, number one is I really genuinely want all of my closers to be the most lethal salespeople in the world. Like, the most lethal communicators, the most effective communicators, and all of them have that like as their goal. So that's number one. That's like a cultural thing, is like, we will become the best sales team on the planet. Number two, as a byproduct of that, we hold the belief that every single person that gets on Zoom will buy from us. Doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter where they came from, what their current financial system is. Like nobody would ever get on a sales meeting and be like, sorry dude, like, I couldn't close them because they're broke. They would say they couldn't close yesterday because they don't have funds, but we put a plan in place for them to buy when they have funds. Like, I just don't allow communication around like can'ts, didn'ts, don'ts. Like, I can't, it like makes me so angry. I'm like getting all tense like talking about it, because it just destroys the sales team so quick, and it's such a fast, slippery slope that's so hard to catch. As soon as you allow like, they didn't know who we are, it's like, dude, don't be a bitch. Like, you can close anybody you want to close. And like, even when a salesperson's new, I'll be like, let's play a hypothetical game. Do you think if I took the call they would have bought, even though they don't know who I am? Do you think if Cole took the call they would have bought? Do you think if Tony Robbins took the call they would have bought? Okay, if the answer is yes, then like, where's the difference? What's the deficit here? Oh, I guess it's me. Okay, well, do you want to continue being the deficit? Like, is that your goal, to continue not being good enough? No, definitely not. Okay, let's review the call and I'll show you how we would have closed them. But like, don't ever tell me that like, you're not trying to close somebody. Mm-hmm. And I get so intense about that, because especially for us at such a high scale, like, if I get a couple of those a week, it just throws off our projections. Like, we literally can't afford to like not close everybody that shows up with us. So it's just, I would really focus on making that cultural shift of like, everybody that gets on Zoom with us will buy. And then if they're not a fit, I'll take care of that. Like, we'll let our client success team like brief on them if we need to, if like you oversold. If you make them mad, I'll call them. I just need you to close.
Yeah.
We got a question of this too.
So my question is, I'm walking in as a sales manager, and we are switched over from completely selling launches to like a evergreen model, and I just wanted to know what advice you would have.
Okay, well, I know your situation. So what I would do is, again, I told this to Sage, but you have a pretty big organic audience, active list, et cetera. You're new to selling evergreen. What I would do is just send an email. I don't know what your current email marketing strategy is. So, maybe you're already doing a bunch of stuff and you can't do this, but if this is really a priority, I would say that you probably could. You have a big active segment, you have a big Facebook group. Just use what the email marketing training is in the course to just send 1 or 2 emails a week to book a call. Right? Could be a little short video, book a call to fill your calendar. And get a good gauge of like, okay, when we send this type of email, how much how far does my calendar book out? What do the applications look like? How many do we cancel? Like get the application grading system down and how many you cancel and how many you do this. You take 2 weeks of calls yourself, and then during those 2 weeks, you're documenting everything you do. Every single close that you have, or even call that you think is good that didn't close even, you add to the call library. Then you're gonna go through those later and break them down. What you were doing, why you were doing it, every step of the way. Hey, when the prospect said this is a key thing. Make sure you notice this. So call review, and now you're building out a training. Then what's also gonna happen is by the end of, let's say, 20 to 30 calls, which is only gonna take probably, based on how big your audience is, a couple of emails. After 20, 30 calls, maybe it's 50 calls. 50 calls is like 2 weeks full of calls. Sure, 50. You're gonna be like, okay, this is how the discovery needs to sound. This is how the pitch needs to sound. Because even like me, I'll write a pitch for an offer, but then if I get on the phone, I usually always have to change it. I'm like, like this part kind of sounded like crap. Like this part didn't really roll off the tongue. They didn't respond well to this part, but when I said this one time, they really responded to that. You incorporate it back in. After a good series of a couple weeks, 2 weeks, you're like, okay, discovery, boom, this is what it sounds like. Pitch, boom, this is what it sounds like. So it's like you come up with your initial hypothesis of what all that stuff should be, you take that onto the calls, 2 weeks of iterations. At the end, we have a bunch of really good sounding calls, and you know exactly how to do the discovery, exactly the pitch. You probably know the top 5 to 10 common sales objections. And now what's called the validation phase is over, right? So then what we want to do is you probably want to hire 2 sales reps, right? That way, if you hire one, it's like the rule of 2, right? If you hire one, is it the process? Is it you? Is it them? If you hire 2 and they both work out, you've done a great job. If one works out, probably natural churn. If both don't work out, maybe you did something and you failed as a sales manager, right? So then you hire 2 and start to ramp those up. So then, just to continue this, once she hires the 2, Brant, are you filled in on the situation?
For the most part.
Okay, so she went through the validation phase, took the calls herself, built out all the SOPs, all that stuff. Now she's ready to maybe phase out her calls a little bit, hire the first 2 sales reps. Mm-hmm. How does she think about the first 7, 14 days hiring of et cetera? New sales manager.
Yep, so this is exactly what I would do. First 7 days, I'd get 2 closers ready to go. The homework I would give them before they came on the team is to listen to at least 20 of your calls that you've taken. Idealistically, it could be 10 to 20 calls, and study them. Give them an overview of the script or framework. As a sidebar, I only really talk in terms of call frameworks, never call scripts. So give them a call framework of what it should sound like. And then for the first 7 days, I would take 3 to 4 sales calls a day for you personally and have them shadow and listen and do like a recap after the calls and have them talk through why it worked, why it didn't work, etc. Days 7 through 21, I would start giving them a few calls a day, definitely not full calendars, like 2 to 3 a day. And then at the end of the day or at the beginning of each day, go review their calls with them. I would do that pretty slowly. That also allows you to still take a few calls if you'd like to keep your revenue consistent and give them a few. And then really after 3 weeks, they should have taken maybe 10 to 15 calls at that point. They should be good to go at that point to start taking a full calendar. So after 3 weeks, you can start moving them into a full calendar. By the end of month 1, they're pretty much ready to go 100%.
Yeah, and then just remember, you're the sales manager, right? So with a business owner, when we give this like hard advice of like, you guys got to review more calls, I also kind of give it tongue in cheek, knowing that like, you're going to do your best. Are you ever going to review enough calls as the business owner? Probably not. But you're the sales manager, so you can review damn near every call, especially when you got 2 sales reps. So keep in mind, and this goes for everybody, your sales manager, and you'll even have this natural tendency. It doesn't mean that you're like a bad sales manager. It really just is a natural tendency. You're going to want to shift your attention over to stuff that's more fun. So like creating a new sales script or doing some stuff with the CRM and like fixing the tracking. That's all fine, but limit yourself to that like being like 20% of your time. 80% of your time should be the boring work of listening to calls, calling your reps, giving them 5 to 10 minute coaching sessions, or scheduling a one-on-one, doing a call review, sending them a loom, whatever you need to do, right? And that's like 80% of your day, every day is like, these are your proteges, you got to build them up. And the thing is, and especially if you're just reviewing call, and you're just on top of them, you're going to know if they're going to work out or not. Now also, don't pendulum swing and make the mistake. I'll tell you a story. So my first sales job ever, I was selling real estate agents, and my sales manager, he was pretty good. He was actually from Clients on Demand, and he knew what he was doing. He was under so much pressure from the business owner to get the team to perform that like what he would do is he'd be on, like they had a software to where they could listen to the call as it was going on. And so he'd be listening to the call as it was going on, and then he would be slacking me, trying to tell me the exact things to say as if he was on the call. I mean, it sounds funny, but no, like this was serious, and like they thought this was a good idea. And so like I would be on the, I'm newer. I was good actually, but this really messed me up. And so I was like trying to follow the rules, and I'm like on the call talking to somebody, it's an audio call. I'm like looking at Slack, and I'm trying to say, and I'm also like naive at this point to where I think like, oh, if I just say these words, they're gonna buy somehow. So I'm like trying to say these words. People were like, what the hell, just tell me the price. And it was just a disaster. And then after the call, I'd immediately get called by him and get like reprimanded. Multiple times a day sometimes. And so like, since, if I would have known better, I just would have quit and went somewhere else. However, I didn't know any better. So like I took in all of this coaching, which was good. It was just the way it was given was too much like that. And what happened was he couldn't turn around the team, probably because he was doing what he was doing. And then he got fired. As soon as he got fired, I went from like one of the worst people on the team, literally 30 days, best person on the team, and then did like 6 or 7 more months, best person on the team. No coaching. And what I did is I was good about investing in myself, taking sales courses, like hiring a sales coach, having a sales coach give me some call reviews. That helped me out a lot. So I just had to take the initiative there. It's not like I got no coaching at all, but that's an example. If you want to know what too much is, that's what too much is. And that's a real example of when he went away, it was like the whole team it was especially like the bottom people, because that's where all his attention was going, just like right to the top. And then, it's because I had flexibility to finally like be myself, Who else?
We recently raised our prices, and a couple of the reps have maintained decent closing rates, like 35%. Everyone else got tanked, especially the new people, like 5 to 8% close rate. What do you do in a situation like that to set the standard? A lot of them they're feeling the ebb, and they're trying to keep their mindset up, but they're like, oh yeah, I think it's because of the price increase, but we have clear evidence that it's not affecting 2 people at all.
Mm-hmm. Bryan.
Yeah, so what I would do, this is where, Mitchell talks about, we get really personal with our reps. This is a moment where I get on a one-on-one with them, and it's we're, doing a therapy session together. It's like, dude, what's going on? What's in your head? Oh, well, the price increase. Okay, let's talk through that. If 2 other closers are closing just fine, do you really think it's the price? No. Okay, well, then what's left? I don't know. I guess it's me. Okay, got it. Well, why do we think this is going on? And did you know the spiel from there because you coach people? It really does just become a full-on one-on-one coaching session. And then ultimately, I think 90% of the time what the answer ends up being is hey, take a deep breath. You're not going to get fired. I want you to work out. I just need you to go review 10 of your calls this weekend from when you were closing. Will you commit to do that? I need you to go review 10 of them ASAP. Send me a message on what you noticed, what you were doing well on those 10 calls that you're not doing anymore, and you'll bounce back fine. You'll be okay. But what I found with sales reps is often when they're actually in their lowest of lows, the worst thing that you can do is give them a hard time. The worst thing. It'll just make the problem so much worse. If I have a closer that has a really bad 1 week or 2 weeks or just so uncharacteristically bad, it's so extreme that just giving them a super hard time is only going to make it worse, and they just need to know that I want them to win and that I think that they're a winner and that I know that they can bounce back. They go listen to 10 calls from when they were winning and they get their head back in the game. And then if it perpetuates for more than 30 days and there's not other environmental factors, then I would look to replace them.
Mm. Yeah, key little nugget there too. I've said this nugget a million times, but you should always have your sales reps listen to a win a day. 1.5, 2x speed. Win a day keeps the sales manager away. Keep it in mind.
Yeah, it really is so powerful.
Yeah, that's what I would always do. Like I didn't have a lot of, when I was even at TF, I only had 2 of my calls reviewed all time. But I just had, you know, and again, like our sales team was really good. And it was really good just because a lot of the standards and just the accountability, there was no training and technique, but you know, you can get pretty far with standards and accountability. But those standards forced me to, you know, I couldn't come to the sales meeting and be like, well, you know, I'm not hitting my results because you're providing 0 training whatsoever. That was not an option. So what did I do? I just had to train myself. And that's also why, you know, that's actually a gift in a sense of why I got really good. But, you know, I had to go home, take calls. At night, I'd be like driving, listen to myself fuck up a call, you know? And then you're like, and it's pretty easy too. Like even when you, in the moment, you're like, why did they not close? And then you wait 2 days for the emotions to dissipate, then you listen to it. It's like, oh, okay, well, I sound like an idiot. You know, like I was like robotic, I sounded horrible. It's almost like, you know, when you write copy and you write this like sales letter or this post and you're like, this could be, I call Mitchell, this is the best thing I've ever written. It is literally, we're gonna be rich. Like, we're gonna hit over 100 million. Best thing I've ever written. He's like, oh, okay. Happy for you, man. And then I'm like, okay. And then 2 days later, I read that same thing and I'm like, yeah, I can't even run this. Like, this is bad. And then you edit it and it gets better. And then you wait a couple of days, you think it's, oh, okay. You know, and usually what's funny is like, the stuff that ends up working the best is like, I write it, I think it's really good, I let it fizzle a couple of days, then I rewrite it, and then I have this like borderline, like, I just don't know. Like, are they gonna get this? Like, you know? And then my team's always like, oh yeah, it's good. I'm like, I don't know. And then I'm like, fuck it, we'll just run it anyways. And like the last time that happened was our unlimited leads offer, which was an auto webinar, and it just fully liquidated from day 1 on ad spend, no testing. Only reason we cut it off is because it was bringing in kind of a biz op audience and we were trying to upsell to our B2B, so it didn't work out. But I mean, we didn't lose any money. We probably made it. I mean, we definitely made money from it. And we could maybe turn it back on in the future, but anyways, I digress.
Well, one quick thought before the question. Another important like thought on that, and this is a really good nugget as well. One of the easiest ways to identify a salesperson that will be like an all-star salesperson is based on the level of curiosity they have about why their calls aren't closing, right? So the other thing I would be looking at, like with those bottom reps, are like, how many questions are they asking me about their sales calls? Like, are they calling me and being like, dude, I said this and it didn't work, like, can you review this with me? If they don't have like an incessant curiosity about what's going on and they're just down in the dumps, it's a pretty clear sign that they'll stay down in the dumps for a long time. But all of my closers, especially when they were training, I knew that they were gonna win because like they called me every single day being like, hey, I did this on a call, like, do you think I could have done this differently? Could I have said this differently? I said it this way, I don't think it was perfect, how do you say it? And all of you, like, you went through a stage where you were incessantly curious about business, about sales, and it's why you're here where you're here. It's gonna be the same thing with people in your company and your sales team. Like, the level of curiosity that they have about what's not perfect will almost always be a direct correlation to how quickly they'll grow within your company. So it is, for me, a red flag if somebody isn't curious about how they can be better and where they're lacking. Sidebar.
Cool. Do we have one over here?
Yeah, I have a question about managing salespeople's energy levels. I had a sales rep, she was a coach and she just became a sales rep in November. She started off closing really well, had 60% of calls, and then the last couple of months she's had huge swings in her energy. And I review her calls on a daily basis, and the only thing that ever really seems to be off when she's not closing is her tone and her energy and how she's showing up. So how do you go about managing that aspect when it's not really a skill set issue?
That's all you.
Man, it's so elementary, but it really starts with like, how are you sleeping? Like, are you eating healthy food? Are you like being done with your time? Like, I really do start there. Like, what is your routine like? Like, how are we spending your evenings? How are you spending your time? What's going on? Like, are you physically taking care of yourself? Let's assume the answer is yes, I am. I'm doing everything I can. Okay, got it. Number two, like, is there a common thread between when you feel good and when you feel bad? Is there environmental things going on? Like, are you having relationship issues? Is there something happening with your family? Like, are you perplexed about something? Are you having like a religious crisis? Like, secondary to physical, there's almost always going to be something environmentally going on. So let's assume in a crazy way there's not, but 90% of the time it'll be physical or environmental. Then number three, it's like, okay, well, are you happy and fulfilled? Like, do you enjoy being a salesperson? If it's not those first two things, it's almost always going to be the third. They're going to be like, if I'm being honest, I like get so stressed about my day. I get so anxious about calls. I like dread my calendar at the beginning of the week. I like white knuckled through that for the first 2 months, and now I just have like this dread thinking about my week. Then it's like, okay, well, I hear you. I think you're a really valuable asset. Obviously, being a closer isn't the long-term seat for you on the bus. Like, let's put a plan in place for you to be on a different seat on the bus. Because I don't want you to be miserable, like dreading your calendar every single week. That's not healthy, and you're gonna get burned out and get sick. So physical, environmental, are you fulfilled and having fun and joyful? I've personally never seen an instance where like the answer was yes to all of those three things, and then they still had these big, massive up and down swings.
If it was the third one where they were stressed or overwhelmed, would you then see that the sign that this person's just not a salesperson and that you would then be able to do the other way?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd categorize it as like they're not a salesperson. I would just say like this is not the right seat for them at this time in life. Like, it's not the best place for them. Because maybe at a different season of life, it could be like some of our best account managers and closers were our best closers. And then they got into a new season of life where it no longer made sense for them to be a closer anymore.
Yeah.
You got another one over here.
So two quick questions about setting setters to closer ratio and lead volume from VSL. I've asked different people to get different answers, so I wanted to run them by you guys. But have you found like a golden ratio between setters and closers?
Yeah, so in your recruiters, and it's B2B, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of B2C. Yeah. What's your cost per lead?
About 150.
Right, so you're doing like direct VSL?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I actually asked those questions, because it's what we've learned is like, man, like we had all these rules, and then they're for most everybody, the RCA model and the KPIs, it works for everybody. For the direct VSL, it's a little bit different because most people don't opt in because it's not curiosity based. It's promise direct lead based. It's offer based, and then most of the people opt in. So you might have $150 CPL, $250 CPPC, right? $300 CPPC. That's what we have. So yeah, in general, I would say the number one thing you got to look at is leads, and like again, it depends on how good the leads are. If you had amazing leads, I'd say a minimum 400, 500 leads per month per setter, right? Now, maybe if they're all 1K buyers, maybe you go down to like 200 or 300 leads per month per setter for some reason. If they're opt-ins and they're a little bit less intent, could be as high as 800 to 1,200 per month per setter. So what you got to do, like anything else, is you sort of use those benchmarks to pick a hypothesis and then kind of just monitor it over time and play with the numbers. And as you obviously scale more spend and they get more, do you get a linear increase? Does it kind of drop off? And then when does it make sense to hire another one?
Right, if I turn one of my setters into a hybrid setter closer, I'm not sure if it's a bad idea or a good idea. And my idea is like once our team's full, then takes it off, like hire a full-time setter or what.
Yeah, it really just depends on the hybrid thing. Like it can be really the only utility for that, in my opinion, is if you just don't want to put them on the inbound calendar yet because they're not experienced enough. But once like they are experienced enough, you make more, like if you have so like closers should do outbound when they have no-shows, extra time. They should hit their follow-ups when they have no-shows, extra time. But outside of that, Like I was consulting one team and they were like, yeah, what do you think about us giving the closers 3 calls a day and then them spending half the time on self-setting? Well, I was like, okay, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to have like the good old culture, you know, closer, everybody outbounds here. And they should when they have extra time, no shows, etc. But if you have a really, really good person, you know, what's gonna make you more money? Having a 40% closer take 6 calls a day, all inbound, and closing 40% of those? Or only giving them 3 calls and then having them self-set the rest of the time and they're gonna inevitably take less calls because of that? What's gonna make you the most money? The first one, right? So you see how like this whole like, all the closers should do outbound. I mean, yes, like they should, but what it more looks like is once you have somebody fully ramped, whatever their availability is, 6 calls a day, you just gotta prime them and train them to where when you have a no-show does not mean go to Taco Bell, have a siesta. Does not mean, okay, no-show, thank God, taking a nap. No, it's like no-show, outbound, no-show, follow-up pipeline. It's like you already committed yourself to working that hour anyways. You had a call on the calendar. You just gotta, because I mean, right then, even if you have 80% show rates, you're at least gonna get an hour a day. Likely, you'll get 1 to 2 hours a day of that stuff. 2 hours a day of outbound pipeline and pipeline follow-up, I mean, that's usually enough to really get the motor running on that stuff if they're efficient with it and they actually do it. But if they're taking walks and they're sleeping and they're, I don't know, doing whatever else, then they're probably not gonna get that as much. Right? So to answer your question, again, the hybrid self-setting is fine, but once the person's good enough, it's in your own best interest to try to get appointments onto their calendar and at least have them show up every day with a full calendar.
Makes sense. And for the VSL, I usually have a 26-minute VSL with a countdown timer, and then the call action when to book a call is after that, then they have to go through the routing form and then they get it. So I guess I've been having my VSL do a lot of the speed work for me up until now. But then your VSL has no timer, but you have to do the same team.
Yeah, if you're direct though, you shouldn't have a timer.
Oh, I have an indirect 26 VSL.
Oh, I see. Dude, we tested it, timer, no timer. Okay, here's what I did. Is we had a timer. And then I had a hypothesis that the timer was getting us less calls and really didn't help anything. So I didn't tell anybody, but I just removed the timer. And then guess what? Because I didn't want to tell anybody because I'm like, the closers are gonna create this self-fulfilling prophecy. Then they're gonna be like, they're not watching the video, and I had to send them back. I didn't want to do that. So I just removed it and didn't tell anybody, and the close rate stayed the same, and they didn't even notice. So I just would, probably remove the timer. We got double the calls from that.
Right, and we did that once. I think I saw your report for the last one of your trainings, and then the call quality went really bad.
Well, it could have been spam. I mean, you're running YouTube, dude. Right. YouTube's trash right now. And the other thing too is maybe just set the timer for like 2 minutes instead of like to the CTA. Just set it a couple of minutes to offset the people who just robotically click all the way through.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool.
All right, cool. We got a question over here on the left. Jerry.
We've been doing setters for about 2 months now. They're not getting their KPIs just yet, but we're getting a lot of inbound apps anyway, so getting calls isn't really a problem. So I just started to wonder, do I actually even need setters? At what point would you make that call, and what things do I need to do first before we arrive at that?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I was trying to tell you guys on a previous call, is like, what do setters do? What constraint do they actually, every hire you make in your business solves a certain constraint, right? So closers, what constraint does that solve? Availability, right? Setters, what constraint does that solve? Appointments, and also potentially return on ad spend, because you are getting appointments, but you need to get more out of your existing appointments at scale. So the thing is if you have enough appointments and you have your ROAS is looking good, then and your show rates are looking good too, then there's really no point in having them, right? And so I see a lot of people, they just it's like they don't think by first principles, and they just I'm gonna hire some setters. And you should look for an actual fundamental reason to hire them. Now, in your case, what I do think what is optimal a lot of times is if you're doing the app rating system, let's say you have 6 closers and you technically don't need setters, and you could say, well, we should just scale to 8 closers. Well, I would say that it does kind of make sense to maybe have 1 or 2 or 2 or 3, somewhere in that range. You might not do the full 1-to-1 ratio, but you have a couple, because that way the apps that are kind of 2 grade, that we call them, they can at least take those apps and they'll still outbound to people and they'll still get some calls. But you can get 2 killers in that position. They'll be revenue producing assets. Yeah, you don't really need to hire more setters right now to fix a constraint. You keep the power 2, you scale closers. And then once they're taking too many inbound triage, you add another one. And then maybe at one point, your ad spends 30% of your P&L. You're kind of like, this is starting to get expensive. And you have 8 closers. Okay, well, let's take the setting team up to 5 or 6 people. And then that can increase the volume. We can actually decrease ad spend. You see what I mean? Yeah. And the thing is for us, did we actually do it that way? No, we just kind of hired setters and closers all at once. Granted, was that the best way to do it? I don't know. However, what I will say is we had all had experience, me, Mitchell, and Bryan, of doing setting at the highest level and building setting teams at the highest level in the past before we even started Closers.io. So it was just kind of in our natural skill set to do that anyways. And it was also just easy. Now, for the average person, if evergreen sales is new to you, I really don't recommend trying to do setters and closers at the same time. It's either if you're running a funnel that has to use setters, maybe a paid, buyer funnel or a Facebook group funnel, then yeah, okay, you got to do setters first and validate that team. You take all the calls, then you do closers. But if you're getting really good results from email and call funnel, focus on closers and really getting that team airtight before you add setters. Because trying to validate essentially 2 departments at once is a lot for somebody who's never done the sales team thing before. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right? So it's yeah, we did it, but that's what we do. So it's a little bit different.
Thank you.
Cool.
Hey dude, would love to know your thoughts on integrating organic content and paid ads when it comes to scaling acquisition. I know you talked about your single lessons that you did last year, your observations of the clients you had that have future channels and followings, the increased lead quality, the increased retention when it comes to people who have been watching you for a long time versus people who have followers. Just curious to know what as a business speaking.
Yeah. I'll give you some ramblings. You guys have seen the interview with Hormozy and Graham Stephan where he's what's he say? It's Graham Stephan's oh yeah, if I had a sales team, I'd make whatever, And Hormozy's if I had your audience, I'd be a billionaire. I can't tell you how many, I laughed when I saw that because I can't tell you how many times that me and Bryan or Mitchell will be we'll look at a client situation, we'll be yeah, if we had that, we'd be doing 100+ million a year, 10 million a month.
Even Boyd made me want to throw up earlier.
Yeah, it's we're oh my God, it almost brings me pain, It's I'll hear people and they'll be like Iman Gadzhi, for instance, I heard he's doing $1 million a month. I don't know if that's true, but this guy is he gets massive amounts of views. And to me, most people, $1 million a month, that's pretty good. Maybe he's doing $2 million a month. Even at that, I look at that audience, I'm fuck, if we had that, 10 million a month. It'd be unquestionable, So, how do you, this is pretty controversial, but if you look at the 2 most probably controversial and biggest people who ever done info to my knowledge, right? You have Grant Cardone, 200+ million, and Dave Ramsey, 300+ million. You have Andrew Tate, 20 million a month. What do all these people have in common? Huge, massive fame, right? So if you really want to get to the biggest level in the game and what we're all trying to do, you got to do the organic at a certain point. Now, look, there is the VShred 300+ million all direct response, Golden Hippo, $1 billion+ company, all direct response, Agora, 1.5 billion, all direct response, all paid ads. So, both are possible. I just think doing that model for most people here is probably not reasonable. And it's also, I think unless your health or your finance, pretty tough. You know, you're not gonna do that in coaching. So, yeah, I mean, I think at the end, you know, the biggest potential comes with organic. Here's kind of how I also think about it is like, you know, in the beginning, if you look at paid versus look at organic, paid, it's like you kind of can't figure it out, but then once you do, it's insane, right? I mean, really, if you know how to do a sales team and you know how to do the CSMs, and then you just figure out paid, those 3 skills, $1 million a month, done, right? It's that easy. Now, organic, it's like, I mean, you know, I know you guys have all had this experience. I mean, it's like, you try, you're like, dude, this is so frustrating. I'm not getting any views. This sucks. And it's really hard. However, long term, I'd rather do $1 million a month off organic than it would off paid. Tremendously less complexity, more long term. You could have a smaller sales team. Your sales team could all do 40 units a month because it's all lay down leads. You could charge premium pricing. You know what the other crazy thing is? It's not anybody in this room. We've had clients before though, where I've actually happened to buy their product. I buy like a bunch of shit. I bought their product and it's horrible, but they're famous, okay? Now I also know through consulting the client what their refund rates are. And their refund rates are like 1% or below on a horrible product. I'm like, dude, if I sold this from ads with a sales team to cold, I would be in jail. You know, like, and so what happens is because, or with organic, it's like people know, like, and trust you. There's already so much reciprocity built in, and they already they're not persuaded by a salesperson. They're already kind of conclude on their own that like, I really want to do this program before they even talk to the salesperson, that they buy. And for them to have a bad experience, they have to admit to themselves that they made a poor lapse in judgment. Right? Well, what do we know about humans? The first rule of influence, as Robert Cialdini writes in the book Influence, is the consistency bias, right? We want to appear consistent. So that doesn't happen very often. People buy, you know, like, I'm not going to say any names, but some of the people, I mean, like, look, like, buy, like, you know, I haven't bought Andrew Tate's thing. I just imagine it's probably not very good. I bet he doesn't get a lot of refunds. You know, I mean, compared to what he would get if he ran ads. It's not even close. And it's just people like buy it and then they convince themselves it's good. I don't want to say the person's name, but there's another person that's just like this, and you guys would totally agree if I said the name. But, you know, he does sales training, and the product sucks, but people love it, you know? They just get motivated. So anyways, yeah, it's like the organic is a real thing. So I'm getting all off track, but in my mind, but what I'm trying to do, and this will take a long time, is it's like, okay, you do the paid ads, you scale with the paid ads, you build the system with the ads, right? What I came up with and I showed you guys, that like took me, honestly, I think I really just liked the marketing, so I refused to even build this. Once I got sick of it, I was like, okay, I gotta build myself a system to get out of this. Once that's in place, I'm gonna have a lot more time back, I'm gonna try to go all in on content, you know? It's not something I necessarily, like a lot of you guys are like, man, if I could just do content, that'd be like my dream. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I kind of like it, I kind of don't, you know? I like building businesses, you know? So I'm gonna try to get back to that, and then in a perfect world, eventually we could get our content to such a point where we wouldn't have to run ads. Like that would be perfect, right? And because long-term, it's the content game. It is the most longevity. You could always pivot your audience if you want to do something else. Like I do think it's the best, but it's almost like you need paid first and then content takes over later. That's kind of, you know, what I think is the best thing.
So for those of us that are transitioning from direct response to looking at content, I think the transition feels overwhelming because it's like you're going from nothing to very little to like freaking emoji style reels, 5 times things like that. Is there a particular thing that notes that you think all the people in case you consider where it's like,
yeah,
maybe it's a podcast a week or you do a YouTube channel?
Yeah, again, like I kind of like, I tiptoe on this topic because like, you know, what I can tell you how to get to like 10,000 YouTube subscribers, right? But like, I'm not an expert in that stuff. But you know, obviously I know a lot of people, there's a lot of people like Clark, for instance, in here that are experts in it. So number one, ask the experts in here of huge audience. I would say, and I think most people would agree with this. Like, you should probably just focus on one channel. And then, yeah, maybe if you have the money, hire the team to splice it up on all the different channels, right? But going in on one and just super focusing on one probably makes the most sense. And so maybe that's Twitter, maybe that's YouTube, whatever. And then batch it. Because I always start doing it and I just fall off the wagon, man. You know?
Cool, we got one here. Brandon.
Yeah, quick question, guys. I know you mentioned the importance of closers maximizing their downtime for their amount of calls. And I'm curious what kind of protocols or recommendations you would have around that.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Like, the highest leverage thing is for them to continually nurture their pipeline. So from a more tactical perspective, like, what that means is, especially because we have a culture of everybody that we talk to will buy, like, I expect one of two outcomes from a sales call. One, the person's like, screw you guys, stop trying to push me so hard, I never want to talk to you again. Like, they block their phone number. Or two, them saying, yeah, I definitely want to do this. There's just X, Y, and Z things stopping me, finances, logistics. And then they need to put a plan in place for them to buy at some point in time, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if we have 90% of our calls having outcome number two, then theoretically there should be like a 14, 30, 60, 90-day window in which we need to get them continually bought in and nurtured for us to buy. Also, especially like if any of you have been closers before, how many times has there been a situation where like somebody was so ready to buy, they're like, yeah, I'll have my paycheck next week, and then you call them next Friday and they're like, oh, so sorry, I accidentally booked a call with so-and-so on Tuesday, my paycheck came early, and I bought from them. Well, why does that happen? Because we didn't have a frequent enough point of contact with them. So if somebody's in pipeline, like Cole talks about like a hot list versus a warm list, if you have people on your hot list who want to buy, they're just logistical things. Like when I was closing, I would text them damn near every single day. Like sometimes it was like, here's a case study that made me think of you. Like, hey, like hope you enjoyed Disneyland this weekend. Hey, like happy Friday, talk to you next Tuesday. Like I would literally talk to them every single day. And it's because like one time when we were starting RCA, I had somebody scheduled for like next Wednesday follow-up. They called, like they texted me Wednesday morning and they're like, hey, so sorry, I bought this program yesterday. And I was like, never fucking again. Is that gonna happen to me in my entire life? And so I expect the same thing from my sales team. Like they should be talking to people on their hot list almost every single day so that they're in pocket. And that takes time. So that's number one. And that's what I want them to spend 80% of their time doing. Number two, usually the next highest leverage point of contact for them is to make some posts on social media, especially Facebook. Oftentimes closers will go add follow-ups as friends on Facebook. So they'll go make content on Facebook, repost some of our posts that have worked really well. So that's number two. And then number three will literally just be like dialing people that they've talked to in the past that have followed off from responding to their texts, or just straight up cold dialing, number four. But usually once they get to number three, like especially once a closer's been a closer for a while, they'll have a list of like 400 people that have scheduled on their calendar that they've either no-showed or talked to, and they can just start calling that list. Like when Cole and I and Mitchell were closing, we close people all the time where we'd be like, hey Bill, we talked 4 months ago, you don't remember, like do you still have X, Y, and Z problem? What's been going on? They're like, yeah, I do. Perfect, I actually have 30 minutes now, let's just talk through this, close them.
I appreciate you sharing that with me. My question was more about being a sales manager. How do I make sure they're actually maximizing their downtime?
Yeah, so I got this one. So, okay, so first, step one, you have to have a standard in your company where missing projections is unacceptable. Step one, right? Then you just set projections high enough, or push them to set projections high enough to where they could not feasibly hit them without doing outbound and follow-up. Now, therefore, they will be forced to do outbound and follow-up. Does that make sense? So for instance, when I was at TF, if I would have sat on my ass and only done the inbound calls, I would have done about 4 units a week. However, I did about 8 to 10 units a week. Where did those 8 to 10 units come from? Pipeline, follow-up, cold calling, right? A lot of pipeline follow-up. Most of them were just outbound, pipeline, like crazy, right? So now, was the projection there? Was our team standard for a week? No, not even close. If I hit 4 a week and I said, look, dude, here's all my inbound calls, I closed every single one that was closable. Like these other people were not feasibly closable, whatever, right? That just would have fallen on deaf ears. That was not an excuse. It was like, go find deals. They would tell me to go to Walmart and just passing out letters. Like, go find one at Walmart. I know that sounds weird, but like that was literally a piece of advice I got. But seriously, you have to have that standard high. And then the behavior follows from there. I wasn't given like, here's how to follow up. Here's how to do this. Here's this process, this. It's just, it was a standard and then the behavior followed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it. So basically just setting the projections and making sure they understand what they need to hit and not micromanage them on a daily basis to see if they actually do it.
Yeah. I mean, you also want if they're not hitting, if they got 0 yesterday and you're like, why did you get 0 yesterday? Okay, cool. So they're like, oh, I had 6 calls and 3 no-showed. And you're like, okay, you had 6 calls, 3 no-showed. Okay, what happened on the 3 that showed? Okay, great. What did you do with those other 3 hours? How many dials did you make? Right? So you could see how you could still dig in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And what about like study time? You mentioned the importance of closers self-studying themselves. I see some of my closers block off time during their working hours for studying.
No, it's got to be before the day or after the day, right? Because as a closer, look, as a writer, if I'm writing copy, I can do that at 5 in the morning, and that's probably when it's best to do it. However, if I'm a closer, I cannot really call anybody at 5 in the morning, unless I'm like in a weird time zone. So, 9 to, I don't know, what is it, 6, 7?
6, 7, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even 10 to 7 probably are the golden hours of calling. So what you want to do is sharpening the sword is before the day, after the day, right? And the easiest thing to do is like, look, you can't call in the morning, but like, should you just roll out of bed and start taking calls? No. So the best thing to do as a closer is, maybe you wake up at 5:30 and 6, you get in a morning routine, you get some sunlight, you get a workout, you get whatever you want to do. And maybe like what I did is I would wake up, I'd read, then once I kind of like fully woke up, I'd go work out. When I would work out, I would listen to wins, and if I wanted to listen to a loss, I'd listen to a loss. I could usually get 2 to 3 calls in at 1.5 to 2x speed during my workout. Now, granted, like, is my workout not as focused because I'm listening to sales calls at the same time? Yeah, but I'm busy, whatever. And then after that, I would do a little bit like meditation. Meditation really helps with closers because you can just kind of like solely rest your focus on the words that they're saying. It is, the call itself done really well is kind of in meditation in a weird woo-woo way. But so meditation really helps, and then I'd be ready for the day. And that would be right at 8 a.m. That's a sales meeting, 9 a.m. we start calling, right? So you can get a lot of that pre-work done in the morning routine kind of built in. And then what I would do is on my drive home from the office, I'd listen to a call that I lost that I wish I would have closed, but I didn't close. And I'd just kind of like think about it.
Cool, we got one last question.
Cool, one last one.
Thank you, guys. Our current tenant is ramping up our repeat revenue. We've always struggled with it, and it seems to be about 30% every month, like 70% is new. And I'd love to, give some context. We do meters for Amazon brands.
Right, I remember we talked on the group call, right? So it's really how to get more repeat business.
Yeah, and what we realized is coming to the mastermind is we don't have a back knock. And the reason we don't have a back knocker is because we're catering to 2 different customer avatars. So 70% of them are new to Amazon and 30% are like big sellers. So just wondering if you can share maybe some helpful tips or best practices to use that back.
Yeah, and so you help them optimize their listings, right? Is it a done for you service?
Correct.
Okay. Well, why would they want to keep working with you?
So the front end is creatives, where we build out their listings. Back end, we can offer them paid advertising and some ranking services. So post-launch support is what we call it.
Right. What do you think is out of all the back-end potential deliverables, what are the most valuable things? What is like the most valuable thing?
Just ramping up the revenue. So if they're new, we can ramp them up to, let's say, 10,000 a month in the first 6 months.
Right. Okay.
Advertising and yeah.
Right. Okay. So why don't you just have a standardized client journey where let's say it's a 12-week process where you're launching a listing, optimizing a listing, etc. Right? That's like kind of the initial thing. But on week 7, you do an ad audit with who happens to be your dedicated back-end salesperson. And then after they do the ad audit, which for the new people could be like, hey, like here's what could happen if you run ads. And then for the existing people, that's where you're really going to show them like where they could get better. You do a full audit. Then you come back the next week, hey, we did the full audit. Here's the things I think you need to work on in the future. The first thing that we need to work on is number 1. Okay? If we can get this done, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, etc. There's all the benefits. Here's what's costing you if you don't get that done. Okay? Then the second thing we move on to is number 2. Because you don't have number 2, you're getting these pains and consequences, but when we get it in place, then you'll have benefit, 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 benefit. Then you do the same for number 3 and number 4, 4 key points. And then you say, does that make sense? Cool. Do you agree with that being probably your best next steps? Okay, great. So if we continue to work together, that's the exact things we'd be doing together. Right? So I can walk you through how our back-end continuation works if you would like, but where do you want to go from here? Right? And so like you would do that and like, let's say it's a 10-week program, week 8, and you just close them right on that call for a longer contract of bam, 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 bam. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm sure you maybe thought of that, and that's just what comes up for me right away.
No, that's great, and that's exactly what we were thinking about as well. Part of the confusion is the 30% that are like existing sellers, they're rated and have probably like 100 to 300 listings. We can probably get more revenue out of those guys.
Well, there's your answer. There's your answer, right? Yeah.
But like, we should focus on having a back-end for.
No, just 1 for now. Yeah, really try to maximize those guys. So like, here's how I would kind of look at it. This is a little weird, but okay. So if you think of your market as a pyramid, right? If your messaging targets the bottom of the pyramid, you only get the bottom of the pyramid. But if your messaging targets the top of the pyramid, you get pretty much everybody. Because everybody at the bottom wants to be at the top. I don't know why that is, it just is. So if you say like, hey, we're gonna do done-for-you webinars for businesses that are 7-figure businesses, you will get the beginner without the offer, opting into your funnel still. I don't know why. And they will book a call too. So anyways, you're gonna get, like, you're gonna make all your messaging to the top 30%. Now, if you could still help those beginners, that's fine. What you're doing is you're still going to sell those knowing that your conversion rate into the back end for them for now is going to be pretty low. But the reason you still sell them anyways is if your fulfillment team can handle it and your results are good, it is a more efficient use of energy, right, in ad spend. And then you make your back end really about more of a corporate kind of enterprise almost solution for those ones with 100, 200, 300 listings. Now, if you could make your whole entire business work and all the KPIs work, only going after that 30%, then that is what I would do. I'm assuming that you've already tried to do that and it's kind of hard, like you don't get enough calls. Maybe. I don't know. Because in a perfect world, you just narrow it down, but then your back end becomes huge. And then you're in a really, really good spot. All your fulfillment's standardized around that perfect client. If for some reason you can't do that, you may have to sell the beginners to just get the ads to perform. Does that make sense? Yeah, like the Hormozy thing is, you used to do everybody, and then he narrowed down to a really specific type of gyms. But that specific type of gyms, he could tell them exactly what to do. It's like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, exactly. Licensed templates, like no room for error. And then it was very easy to sell those people into a huge back end and then keep them. Because they were literally like all of the same person. It is much easier than that. Like we don't have that luxury, because with you guys, it's like you have some people at 150 grand a month, some people at 1.6 million a month spending 37 cents on ads. There's all sorts of different situations. And everything in between. Some people are like, yeah, I already figured out the sales team thing with you guys. Now I'm moving on to the CSMs. I want to figure that out with you guys. Other people are like, dude, I'm still working on the sales team. Some people are more focused on closers. So we can't create that standardized journey. We can with our B2C much more. But like you guys, in a perfect world, solution number 1, top 30% of market, you just go all in on that, expand on that. Does that make sense? Your back end's all for that. Now, if you do that and your cost per call is $1,500 and you're like, dude, we can't make the ads work like this, then you gotta sell to beginners to, and yes, bulk up your fulfillment, that kind of sucks, to sort of liquidate and make the funnel work on the front end. But then still focus the back end on the 30%. Now later on, when that system's in a really good place, you kind of create more of a second continuation that's a little bit lower level once you can handle that level of complexity.
That helps, yeah, because right now it's all organic, so it helps kind of like focus the paid ads and
Yeah, well, yeah, you should just try to run paid ads just to those companies, see what happens. Yeah, might work. I mean, generally paid ads, it's broad market, you get the beginners, so you have to see. I think we got to wrap up though. Igor's kicking me off stage. Thank you guys. Hope you guys are having fun.